this sort of prejudice in India that if you write about the Mughals, you are glorifying the Mughals, and that you are somehow therefore a Marxist and a leftist. While if you write about ancient India and are seen to be enthusiastic about Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta and their achievements, that you're suddenly a card-carrying member of the RSS and have shifted far to the right and are politically suspect from that point of view. I am neither a Marxist, nor am I a member of the RSS. I avoid writing about the Indus Valley or the whole question of the Aryan invasion theory and so on, because I didn't want to get hijacked by that battlefield. India came up with the nearest thing that there is to a universal language, in that the Indian number system is used everywhere by the 13th century. India did indeed ancient India did indeed transform the world, and I don't think you have to be a right-winger or a member of the RSS to say that very clearly.
The Golden Road, How Ancient India Transformed the World, is a work of ambition. We are joined by its author, William Dalrymple. Welcome, William.
Very good to be back, Anand. Thank you.
The neglect of the penetration of India's soft power in ancient world. Why do you think the historians were sloppy about it?
The problem, I think, has been that these academic texts have not been integrated with the wider story of Indian soft power. There are different sort of silos out there, which this work tends to get isolated into. In other words, there's one world which is talking about the Sanskritization of Southeast Asia, in which has been some excellent work by Indian historians. But it's...
How you place Nalanda there in the... do you see it as an ancient leap of pedagogical imagination?
We have to be very careful not to be anachronistic about Nalanda. It unquestionably was the major center of learning, not only in modern South Asia, but in the whole region. And you have scholars coming from China, Japan, Korea, Nepal, Tibet, Sri Lanka, Srivijaya, which is Indonesia, to this place. And so it's a major center of learning. But
you also hint that one reason why the Indian ancestry of a lot of ideas has lost with the time, because their effect was a kind of relay.
The Indian fingerprint, if you like, on these Arab texts are still very much there. No one is disguising the Indian origin of these things, even as they travel through the Mediterranean as far as Britain. They're still very much attributed to Indian scholars. And India has not told the story of its diffusion of its soft power out. And in many areas of Southeast Asia, where earlier generations of Indian scholars slightly overstated the case, to the point that they claimed that there was Indian military and political conquest of Southeast Asia, which was simply not historically true. My view has always been that good scholarship need not be in an inaccessible language. Good scholarship is about using primary sources, about coming up with interesting and innovative ideas that connect the dots in history, and there's no need to express it in jargon.
In the last few years, there has been quite a lot of talk about the civilizational states. Where does India stand in its ancestry of soft power appeal? Has India told its story well to the world? Given this context, well-known historian William Dalrymple's book with a very self-explanatory subtext, The Golden Road, How Ancient India Transformed the World, is a work of ambition. We are joined by its author, William Dalrymple. Welcome, William.
Very good to be back, Anand. Thank you.
So, why not Indo-Sphere? Why the Golden Road? Because that would have been also a very catchy title for the book.
Simply because I preferred the Golden Road. Simple answer. You're quite right. Indo-Sphere was another possible title, and it was one that I thought about. But the Golden Road, I think, has...
the projection of India as Vishwaguru in ancient times has a lot of truth to it, because India was...
I haven't said that. I haven't used that phrase at any time, so that was a misquote, if you've heard me say that. But it's certainly true that Indian ideas diffused. That's the whole point of the book. I have never used the phrase Vishwaguru
No,
in my
you
own
said
writing.
that there is a lot of truth that India was a teacher to the world in a lot of ways.
There is a lot of truth in the fact that India was a teacher. Yes, I mean that's the fundamental premise of the entire book, that Indian ideas. I wouldn't say a teacher to the world, but Indian ideas spread out from India in all directions. Buddhism was probably the single most successful Indian idea, in that it traveled to take over China, Korea, Japan, Mongolia, Siberia, as well as all of Southeast Asia. Hinduism and Sanskrit and the whole Sanskrit literature was part of an extraordinary world that spread from Afghanistan to Bali, while Indian scientific and mathematical ideas spread from China to Baghdad and on to Europe. So yes, I think India came up with the nearest thing that there is to a universal language, in that the Indian number system is used everywhere by the 13th century. So yes, India did indeed transform. Ancient India did indeed transform the world, and I don't think you have to be a right winger or a member of the RSS to say that very clearly.
Your view is that the soft power penetration of China, true as it is, it has been the world view about it has been very Sinocentric.
I would contend is that while the colonial Europeans did a very successful job in giving the world the ancient Greek ideas, so that if you go anywhere around Europe or America, everyone will know exactly who Pythagoras or Archimedes is. And while in the last 40 years, China has done a very, very successful job in telling its story, and the story of the Silk Road, which places it and its product, silk, at the center of world trade in the ancient world. I would contend that India has been much less successful in getting its position out, although I would also argue that India has absolutely an equal right to see itself as the center of a whole network of ideas which spread out from its area and penetrated, as you put it, the world around it. And
so let us go back to the neglect of the penetration of India's soft power in ancient world. Why do you think the historians were sloppy about it?
I think while there has been a great deal of very good scholarship, and please don't for a minute think that I'm in any sense undermining that or denigrating that. There's been spectacular work. What there hasn't been is an overarching narrative like the Silk Road, which has been put out to the wider public and created a sense for Indians that all this is part of their story.
Back to India for a mathematician whose major work came in 6th century, Aryabhatta. How eclectic he was. He drew sources and his own analysis. Was he also studying foreign texts, or he was relying on Vedic mathematics or his own scientific inquiry?
Aryabhatta's text, which survives, he doesn't, obviously give his footnotes. In fact, he writes it as a poem just to add to the cryptic nature of his work. It's in rhyming couplets. It's an extraordinary work. But I think it's clear that he's not sitting in a sort of hermetically sealed box of Indianness. Gupta India was highly cosmopolitan. When you go to the Ajanta caves, you see images of people that look like Scythians and Persians and Greeks and Romans and Ethiopians and Egyptians.
Those who have not read your writings, say about Buddhist art in New York Review of Books, are very much surprised that how did you shift from writing on East India Company, late Mughals, and to centuries back you go and write about ancient India. But was this your initial passion as a historian, digging?
My great love as a teenager was archaeology and ancient history. And it was only when I visited India in 1984 for the first time that I got seduced by colonial history and ended up writing about the East India Company and the Dutch East India Company and the late Mughals and so on. And it's taken me 20 years to write those 4 history books about the company quartet, the Anarchy, White Mughals, Return of a King, and Last Mughal, which told the story. And this is now me returning, in a sense, to my original roots.
What was the trigger for that return to the original project that you had?
Well, as you notice, I've been writing about this in magazine form in the New York Review of Books and other Marg, the art history journal, all along. And I mean, my first piece on Chola bronzes was, I think, in 1995 or something. You know, this is stuff that I've been fascinated in all along, but I've never. And there's a bit of this in 9 Lives too, which was published in 2009. But this is the first time I've done a large-scale history project in this realm. What really allowed me to dive deep, to be honest, was lockdown. I was stuck in my library, where I'm talking to you from, with all my wonderful books on Buddhist and Hindu art and history, I had just finished the company quartet. The 4 books were published in a box set. My collaborator with that, I've worked for 20 years with a wonderful Persian scholar called Bruce Wanell, who did all the translations of the Persian texts that are in those 4 books. He very tragically died of cancer, which also sort of closed, in a sense, my access to many of those texts. And so during lockdown, I dived deep. And as soon as lockdown was over, literally in the first plane out into Cambodia, and had to spend time in quarantine in both Indonesia and in Cambodia, because at that stage quarantine was quite was mandatory.